Above Blind Frog Ranch, the early morning light spread golden across the mesa, seeping into crevices, spilling over sun-scorched rock, and bleeding into the tangled fingers of the cottonwood trees. The earth here held weight, older than memory, heavier than bone. Duane's boots sank silently into the soil, each step leaving a mark in the red earth as he crossed the land he'd walked 100 times and still didn't understand. Behind him, shadows stretched long, men moving in silence, their tools strapped to backs and belts, their eyes cast low but scanning every detail. The ranch had never been kind, but it had always been honest. If the ground wanted to hide something, it would, and no drill or dynamite could change its mind. This time, the land had whispered something new. A week before, lightning struck near the canyon's edge during a rare summer storm. When the crew reached the site, they found a charred circle etched into the rock. Melted sand, burnt sage, a smell like scorched iron. And in the center, barely visible, a perfect spiral no larger than a coin, pressed deep into stone that had never been carved. The sun was higher now. The mesa pulsed with heat. The sound of shovels scraping and metal detectors humming filled the air like a mechanical chant. The team moved like a single organism, synchronized, relentless. In a shaded tent, Eric pored over satellite imagery and topographical maps. Data streamed across multiple monitors, lines and numbers layered over geological veins and ancient fault lines. He traced the spiral's coordinates, cross-referenced magnetic anomalies, and highlighted zones where compasses spun wildly. The quad bikes kicked up plumes of dust as they tore across the dry river. Crows circled overhead. In the distance, the Abato Mountains stood like mute sentinels watching. When they arrived at the site, the wind dropped to nothing. The silence was thick, dense with static. The team split, triangulating the spot. A metal detector wailed. Ground-penetrating radar spiked. Something below. Foot by foot, the hole deepened. Rocks gave way to a clay that shimmered unnaturally in the sunlight. At 6 feet, they hit something hard, not stone, but metal, fused with mineral deposits that shouldn't have existed together. Not naturally. They unearthed a slab, perfectly smooth, covered in etched lines that pulsed faintly in the shade. The spiral mark there again, this time glowing faintly in the heat. The slab was hauled back to the lab. Under UV light, the etchings responded, revealing what looked like constellations, or perhaps a map, or both. The pattern was ancient, but the alloy was unknown. Not from this continent, maybe not from this planet. Back at the original impact site, lightning had left more than a burn. Beneath the spiral, ground-penetrating radar picked up a tunnel, angled unnaturally, like it had bored its way through the rock. No tool marks, no signs of collapse, just a perfectly smooth tube, 40 feet deep. It descended slowly, tethered by fiber optic cable. The tunnel narrowed, then opened into a cavity, round, symmetrical, dry. On the floor, partially buried beneath dust and debris, lay a sphere, black, seamless, reflective like obsidian, but cold to the touch, even under the desert sun. When they retrieved it, it was heavier than expected. Solid. Magnetic fields bent around it like ripples. Static filled their ears, and for a moment, every instrument in the command trailer flatlined. Projected onto the walls, ceiling, and floor, a star map in motion. Not just stars, trajectories, meteor paths, points of impact. Some marked. One in particular pulsed. Duane stared at the projection, hands on his knees, breath shallow. It was the same shape as a petroglyph discovered weeks earlier in the hidden cave near the West Ridge. except that one had been etched by human hands generations ago. And now it seemed like a warning. Animals fled. Compasses reversed. A constant hum filled the air, barely perceptible but always present, like a low-frequency vibration deep in the bones. It wasn't stone. It wasn't metal. It pulsed. It was encased in a cocoon of crystal that fractured light in impossible ways. Every attempt to extract it failed. Tools shattered. Heat dissolved. Even the strongest acid evaporated on contact. Not quickly, not visibly. But day by day, the readings shifted. The object was tunneling. Deeper, away from them. Duane ordered the shaft reinforced, new equipment lowered. Below, the walls of the tunnel began to change, smoothed out like glass. Symbols appeared, spirals again, accompanied by jagged lines like branches or lightning or roots. Sound behaved strangely. Voices echoed in reverse. Footsteps had no sound. Watches stopped. Inside, a fragment of something resembling bone, or perhaps not. A structure of some sort. DNA-like, but layered with crystalline matrices that defied scanning. They placed it in isolation, but it affected the ranch nonetheless. One night, the surveillance cameras failed. When they recovered the footage, every second frame was black. In the gaps, brief flashes of something, shapes, tall, thin, bending light around them. Always near the spiral sites. Always facing the camera. Back in the lab, the team overlaid all spiral locations on a master map. The spirals were not random. They'd formed a sequence, a trajectory leading into the La Salle Mountains. The final point matched the impact zone of a meteor recorded over 500 years ago in oral indigenous histories. Inside, the walls glowed faintly. No tools, no torches. The light came from thin filaments running through the stone like veins. At the center of the room, a pedestal. On it, another slab. This one bore not a spiral, but a map of the stars with a path leading from Orion's belt to Earth, marked with a series of waypoints. Some in deep space, some underground. Back at the ranch, the first spiral began to fade, burning itself out like a fire that had finally consumed all its fuel. But the sphere remained. The stars it showed now included one final symbol, a countdown, not numbers, but phases, shifts in magnetism. Lunar eclipses, geological tremors. The ranch would experience all of them in sequence. Duane stood at the messe's edge, watching the horizon tremble under a deep red sunset. Below, the crew worked in silence, unearthing truths the land had buried for millennia. Dawn breaks over the Uinta Basin. Thin light filters through desert haze, casting long shadows over broken rock and dry brush. The land seems to breathe, ancient, watchful, and unyielding. The ranch sits quiet, nestled among geological scars and secrets. But beneath the silence, something stirs. Cut to static-filled drone footage. A streak of light crosses the night sky, captured by a trail camera the week before. It cuts diagonally, unnaturally slow, trailing sparks like burning salt. The object vanishes just above the mesa ridge. No sound, no explosion, no debris. Only one thing remains. A spiral scorched into solid rock. Perfect, geometric, unmistakable. The hunt begins. Title card: The Hunt for the Mark of the Meteor. Mysteries at Blind Frog Ranch. The ground is fused. Molten rock turned to black glass. A circular depression marks the point of contact, surrounded by dead grass and splintered sage. A nearby cottonwood tree is burned halfway up its trunk, its branches still smoking days later. A survey team sets up instruments in silence. EMF meters spike erratically. Magnetometers flutter in wild loops. A compass spins. Layers of satellite maps lie stacked across a folding table. A gloved hand traces a line from the strike site to a location near the collapsed mine entrance. Infrared overlays show heat signatures days after the impact, heat with no known source. Beneath the maps, a recovered petroglyph from a nearby cave shows the same spiral. Carved hundreds of years ago, the same dimensions, the same shape. The drilling rig groans as it bites through dense clay and compact rock. Vibrations echo through the shaft. 20 feet down, the bit stalls. Instruments cut out. A camera probe is lowered. Blackness. Then, reflection a smooth surface, perfectly spherical, partially embedded in the earth. No seams, no openings, no damage. The object is lifted out by crane. It hums faintly in low frequencies, registering sound below the human hearing range. Heat sensors detect a slow internal pulse, like a heartbeat. At night, it emits a soft, bioluminescent glow, casting shadows that don't match the surrounding terrain. Scans reveal layered internal components, crystalline lattices, coiled structures resembling DNA, but denser, impossibly dense. Carbon analysis fails. The material reflects no known signature. One side bears the spiral again, faint but visible. And beneath it, a crack, hair-thin, beginning to widen. Seen. The cavern system guided by anomalies, the team explores a hidden fault line beneath the ranch. The opening is narrow, but the chamber inside is massive, an underground dome with smooth, glistening walls. In the center, a pedestal, carved from obsidian-like stone. On top, a second sphere, split open. Inside, a mineral core, black with silvery filaments, suspended mid-air between magnetic fields. Motionless, weightless, vibrating microscopically. Laser scanning reveals micro-etchings on the interior surface, star charts, positions, coordinates. One line traced in glowing filaments points directly to Earth ending at Blind Frog Ranch.